What is one rule that was implemented at your school or work that backfired horribly? My middle school had a no touching rule, which meant you'd get suspended for high-fiving a friend. Girls got in trouble for hugging their friends. Our teachers thought this was ridiculous and would have students high-five each other in their classes for a minute every day. So many kids got suspensions that the rule stopped being enforced and only counted if you touched a kid in a bullying situation or sexual harassment. Not sure if it was exactly a rule, but my middle school once encouraged kids to not touch each other at all to reduce physical harassment cases. Even friendly gestures among friends. All that did was get the kids running around touching each other around campus for about a month and a half, screaming physical harassment. As they did so, to add insult to injury, they did it twice as often in front of the admin who made the presentation about it. In my dorm, if you did something that triggered the smoke fire alarm, you had to do a safety presentation for everyone on your floor. This was intended to deter pranksters from pulling the alarm. A guy on our floor was making grilled cheese in the kitchenette and burned it, which legitimately triggered the fire alarm. Afterwards, he explained, assuming that since it had been a legitimate alarm and not a prank, that he wouldn't have to do a presentation. He was, of course, wrong. So, the next Wednesday night, the entire floor assembled, and we were treated to a 30-minute safety presentation on the dangers of grilled cheese sandwiches. It contained literally nothing about fire safety. It was all choking hazards and cholesterol. Our was furious. But the student pointed out that the write-up that he'd been given just said safety presentation. We didn't get any more presentations after that. My high school made students wear these neon t-shirts that read "dress code violator" if their outfit didn't adhere to the school's policy. They became so popular the school began selling them 1 week later. So, mission accomplished and some school funding. We got a new manager for our office. She was an outside hire and was trying to prove herself quickly. And she was obsessed with efficiency. So, her first week here, she sent out this very rudely worded email about employees eating at our desks. We have a very small break area for tables and we have about 300 employees here, and that we all had to stop eating at our desks because it was not efficient to eat and try to work at the same time. Through a coordinated effort by some of the more sassy people at the office, they all had their lunches at the same time and filled the break room with about 90 people. Elbow to elbow, and they all ate standing up. Literally. The next day after that happened, she sent out a follow-up email saying that we could eat at our desks, but she advised us to take a break from our work from time to time. It was pretty funny. School I attended emailed the entire student body to not use Yik Yak because students were being bullied on it. All of the students, myself included, who hadn't heard of the app immediately downloaded it and began using it. New manager got rid of the sofa in the break room so people couldn't nap on their hour-long lunch break. No one overslept or took the piss, but it was good to have the option on a tough day. Stoner guy started sleeping in other places, including in between walls and in the warehouse. That's when we started losing him and couldn't find him, as he'd go into a deeper sleep and was less likely to be disturbed. He didn't lose his job somehow. That place had a hard time hiring. It. To clarify where Stoner guy would go, we'd find him in between walls and shelves. It was a DIY store that had been something else years before, so there were random partition walls and oddly laid out shelving units everywhere. A real shitty show of a store layout. He had quite a few places to hide in and nap. If you return a library book late, your parents would have to return it and explain why it's late. It worked about as well as you would think. The rule lasted a few months before they figured it wasn't worth the cost of replacing all the books. This was actually in the news a couple of months ago. We had a really hot summer last year, and the boys at my little brother's secondary school were mad that they couldn't wear shorts but the girls could wear skirts. The junior leadership team brought it up at a meeting, and the head teacher jokingly went, "Alright, if the boys want to wear skirts, then let them." A group of boys went to school wearing skirts the next day, and that children Is how Scotland was born. A school in my area jacked up the cost of the parking pass. People protested by not buying the pass. Instead they rode the bus. Funny thing is the county really relies on juniors and seniors driving because they don't have enough buses for all the students. The parking pass fee dropped. People drove again. Don't ever let them tell you driving to school is a privilege. They need you to drive to school. At a former job, software development, there was a football table. People would play reasonably often, but just one game to take a break. One day, management came down to the software engineering floor and saw people playing football in the middle of the afternoon. They declared no football until 4:30 p.m. That ended up making it so that everybody knew when there would be other people wanting to play football. So it was much easier to find somebody willing to play and significantly increased the amount of football played at work. High school took all the stall doors off the boys' bathrooms because of graffiti or something. So I started pooping in the bathroom near the office. After a couple of times of the superintendent coming in while I was doing that, all the doors were put back on. Maintain eye contact and nod as the superintendent walks by. I worked for a place that did RMA repairs on PCs. Most of our clients were businesses like hospitals and factories. Anyway, as I was touring the workshop during my orientation, the guy taking me around took me to the QA department. Once all builds or repairs are made, they're sent to the QA department for a final inspection before going out to the customer. The guy jokingly said we used to pay the QA guys bonuses for every mistake they found on a build. I started laughing. The only problem was it wasn't a joke. They actually paid bonuses to the QA people who found mistakes on builds. For anyone not familiar with the internal workings of a PC, it could take less than 3 seconds to completely render a computer inoperable. Hell, you could loosen a connection just by inspecting it. Luckily that policy ended before I was hired. I mean, can you imagine giving someone a bonus for finding screw ups when it would take almost no effort to make a screw up and then claim you found it? You now need 40 hours of community service to graduate. It's recommended that all freshmen do 10 hours a year, while the seniors start as soon as possible to get the 40 hours out of the way. The rule was gone the day before graduation because they would have had less than a 10% graduation rate that year, and it would have made the school look terrible. They did this to try to increase their reputation of being a good school. All the other schools in the area are trash though, so I really don't know why. I'm a programmer. On a previous job, the developers and teams were measured by the number of feature requests they completed. We figured out to subdivide everything to blow it up into the maximum number of feature requests possible. A manager might request a new report. We'd set up separate feature tickets for create button, make button blue, make button respond when clicked, implement business logic, display results in grid, allow sorting of grid, and so on. We'd subdivide a one-day task into 21-hour tasks. Management loved it. Our team looked 20 times as productive, despite deliberately slowing ourselves down with red tape. My high school told my senior class, no senior pranks or none of you walk HA. Result: we didn't throw a prank. Instead, we threw biggest raider of the year on school property with the permission of the county sheriff, as long as we took our bottles with us when we finished. The sheriff retired the next week. He was the real one. Aftermath. My old job had a draconian attendance policy in which if you were at a second late, you got a 1/2 2-point demerit. If you were an hour late, you got that same 1/2 2-point demerit. Demerits accrued. 3 equals verbal warning. 4 equals written. Either 5 or 6 was termination. In addition to making for some anxiety-filled employees that made dumb decisions to speed through snowstorms, it also meant if you got stuck in a traffic jam, you might as well just take your time, stop for gas, get breakfast, etc. Same place also had a similar policy that assured the plague spread through the whole place. Say you came to work at 7. By 9 AM you've got a fever and full-blown flu symptoms. If you clock out then, You get a whole point demerit. But if you sit there coughing and shivering and infecting your co-workers for another 2 hours, till your shift was half over, you only got a half point demerit. My senior year of high school, some guy in my class got an in-school suspension for wearing a headband. He had long, curly hair, so the next couple weeks almost every guy on the football team started wearing headbands in protest. Keep in mind that girls could wear headbands, just not guys. No one really understood this rule. Edit. They started a no gum rule that made a lot of junior high kids start a black market for gum. This has probably happened lots of times. One of my teachers spotted a guy chewing and gave him the usual "well, I hope you brought enough for everybody." Whereupon he got up with a fistful of gum and started handing it out. She didn't send him to the principal, but she never tried that line again. My JR high school adopted a policy to not allow kids to loiter in groups of 5 or more in attempts to crack down on gang mentality. This was freaking JR high. Anyway, me and my group of misfits, 6 of us, were always hanging out during free times. And the principal eventually stopped us and asked us to separate. I had to casually explain to him that we were not a group of 6, but 2 groups of 3 that were intermingling. People caught wind and that rule was basically dead. That was one of the few times I had to explain to my father why he was called into the principal's office with me. "I'm to bring you in, sir. But I think you'll want to hear this. Your son has more than 3 friends. You really should be ashamed of how you've raised him." My company, as part of its alcohol policy, said you should not drink for at least 4 hours before coming to work. When engineers got called about production problems over the weekend, they all just had a beer but could be there in about 4 or 5 hours. No running during recess. It was made because some kid in the 2nd grade ran and tripped. So for whatever reason, they restricted running for all grades K-5. Everyone should know that when you ask a 5-10-year-old to not do something, that's the next thing they're going to do. They started running in the halls, the cafeteria, the classrooms, and you bet your ass they ran outside. After a week, the teachers stopped enforcing it and everyone stopped caring. Edit. No running during recess. It was made because some kid in the 2nd grade ran and tripped. That is the most school thing I've ever heard. An insane amount of time and hand-wringing went into my office's dress code policy. When the final draft was ultimately released, every department head had a valid reason why their staff should be exempted. So the policy wound up only affecting myself and the guy that insisted on making the policy. I violate this policy on a daily basis. When I was in kindergarten, during the morning announcements one day they came on and said, "And please no throwing snowballs. There is a chance you might accidentally get some rocks in them." You could see on the faces of all 20 some students the realization that OMG we could put rocks in them. I went to a private school for elementary, where uniforms were strict. If you didn't wear a belt you'd go to the principal's office and he would make you use a shoestring. Well, when he opened the drawer there was like 6 different colors and everybody thought it was really neat, so for a short period of time there was a bunch of kids coming to school with no belt so they could wear their lime green shoestring belt. I used to work for a production company that employed a lot of really skilled, award-winning editors. There were producers and executives and directors, but the real money makers, the people who really made the company, were the editors. So the company was basically centered around them. The executives would always order in food for the editors, and the editors would usually eat in their offices while doing their thing. One day the executives decided to cut paid lunches to save money. The editors all thought this was a dick move, so they'd go out for lunch and sometimes stay out for like 3 hours. There was nothing the company could do, really, because these editors were top of their game, and if Warner Brothers heard that the editor they always used had left, they might leave too. So the company couldn't do anything. They saved maybe $15 per person per day, but lost like 4 hours per person per day. My high school has a policy where you couldn't wear hats at school unless the school's mascot logo was on it. So a bunch of people just bought a patch of the logo and paperclipped them to their hats. They made a new rule where we had to ask permission to use the restroom during lunch. We all coordinated and the whole cafeteria would raise their hands at once to request to go. They responded by sending us 2 at a time. We did this for a few days, then changed our procedure to everyone just getting up at once and going to the restroom without permission. They didn't ever officially do away with the rule. But the teachers on duty in the lunchroom eventually just stopped enforcing it. Edit. It's interesting how many people responded something like my school had the same rule. And how many people said something like WTF. That's the craziest rule I've heard of. Is this even real? Zero tolerance. Which means if you are involved with fighting, you will be kicked out. No questions asked. They think it would means no more fighting. Nope. It means if the bully is beating up a kid, no one would step in. For fear of involving with the fight and getting kicked out. No one would snitch because it means the bully will target you next. And now you are involved in fighting and get kicked out. It is a shitty policy. My high school attempted to ban trip pants and the like. However, due to a hilariously overlooked typo, the student handbook that got sent to students and parents just said students may not wear pants. We had a good laugh and it made the local news. Unfortunately, this does show the quality of high school I went to. Wasn't ready for college, haha. My high school had a really bad problem with students showing up to class 5 minutes late every day. So they tried 3 different solutions. First, they stopped letting us use lockers. They quickly found out that just meant that nobody brought their books to class. Next, they decided to ban use of the restrooms between class periods. Teachers started complaining about everyone asking for a bathroom pass as soon as class started, so that was abandoned after a week or so. Lastly, one week they made a ton of announcements Monday, Wednesday that all students were to be on time for class. Then on Thursday they suspended any student who was late for insubordination. Turns out that included half the football team. This occurred right before the biggest game of the year, in a town of 4,000 people. This game attracts 16,000. So yeah, they gave that up as well. There was rule they put in place my freshman year of high school. That if you arrived late i.e. after first bell, you couldn't park in the parking lot. You'd have to park at the gas station down the highway and walk to school, making you even more late. It stopped after 20 or so people intentionally showed up late to school and made a mass exodus along the highway. On top of a lot of parents bitching. I don't get the logic of rules like this. Oh. You're late to class? Well, let's make you jump through hoops to make you even more late. As punishment. All this does is that when people are late, they'll just leave instead of dealing with that. If you had 4 tardies in a semester, including first or 0 hour, you would receive a Saturday morning detention. I had accumulated 3 tardies during a semester of my sophomore year because my ride would be a few minutes late. I proceeded to skip school anytime my ride, or myself, would be late, and eventually, a vice principal noticed my absences. Naturally, he asked why I was missing so many days of class. I explained to him that I wasn't going to get a detention for going to school. His only recourse was to suggest that I try to be on time more often. Felt good to walk out of his office knowing that conversation didn't go how he expected. We implemented the buddy bench for lonely people to sit on and make friends. It was pretty damn expensive and nicely decorated. Someone stole it. Not school, but work. My work just recently tried to implement a new attendance policy that didn't last 24 hours. They changed it so that after 2 unexcused absences in a year you were fired. An unexcused absence is any absence or tardiness. I think you were allowed 4 tardies. When you didn't give your boss more than 24 hours notice. Lock the doors on the HR person or boss that came up with that. Add it to their 1 previous absence. Fire them. Fix policy. Rehire to teach them a lesson. My school banned all balls over a couple of inches in diameter because someone kicked a football through a window during lunch. Most of us that walked home walked past the woods by the golf course and had a ready supply of golf balls as a result. Golf balls were allowed under the new rules due to their size. 3 broken windows in one lunch period later they weren't. Our school made it so you couldn't play dodgeball anymore. So what happened was that the gym teachers came up with this new game called Fireball. The rules are there are balls in the middle of the gym people go on 2 separate teams go for, and if you get hit you're out. If you catch a ball you okay, so it was basically dodgeball. Then Fireball was banned. So now there's this new game called Pinball. Which isn't involving the machines unfortunately, but it's basically dodgeball Fireball, but there's bowling pins that need to be knocked over as well. I think they just gave up after a while. A+ gym teachers though.